right, good morning, everyone. I'm Lauren Dillard, the Executive Vice President of NASDAQ's Investment Intelligence Division, and welcome to our Rapid Agreement Summit. We are thrilled to be hosting this event alongside our partners, Databricks, where we'll be sharing the latest trends, insights, and opportunities in data infrastructure and management, so you can accelerate your capabilities and get value from your data faster. And thank you, everyone, for pivoting back to an all-virtual event. If there's anything we've learned, is we have to be adaptable. Quickly, to make sure I set the stage, here at NASDAQ, we're focused on our purpose of driving inclusive capital. We're a capital markets, technology, and data company at our core. Yes, we run our markets, but we also power over 150 markets around the world. We're crime fighters with our anti-financial crime technology. We serve thousands of corporate clients with our governance and ESG solutions. And within investment intelligence, the business we're here today to talk about, we're on a mission to achieve that purpose of inclusive capital by empowering the investment community with technology and insights to make better and faster investment decisions to deliver for you, our clients, and for our clients' stakeholders and beneficiaries. As a result at NASDAQ, we've been fortunate to really have a front row seat to the evolution of data-driven decision-making in finance. Over decades, we've seen data applications in finance grow from a dark art practiced by a few of you probably to mainstream adoption, where virtually all trading and investing strategies are informed by advanced data science. And even though there is more data than ever before, and the tools and technology that are powering all of this have never been more accessible, stitching it all together has never been more of a challenge. We designed this event to bring together both investment managers and technologists so we can bridge the gap and produce a dialogue that will propel all of us, our industry forward, and prepare us for the next generation of data-driven finance. Based on the volume of registrations we've had for this event and the breadth of the organizations tuning in right now, it is very clear there is strong demand for solutions to what must be everyday frustrations being experienced by the data management in our industry. We have an absolutely packed agenda for you this morning, including a live demonstration of a data infrastructure solution we recently announced called Data Fabric by my colleague Bill Daig, our head of NASDAQ Data Link. He'll also be showcasing a new technology from our partners at Databricks called Delta Sharing, a big data sharing protocol. You will not want to miss it. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our host for this summit, our head of artificial intelligence and data service technology, Mike O'Rourke.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank all of you for joining us today. Unfortunately, we only found out recently that Oliver Alberts will not be able to join us for this conversation, so I will be filling in. I'm sure you are all eager to jump straight in, but there's just a small bit of housekeeping that we need to get out of the way first. So please note that this broadcast is considered an on-the-record conversation. We have media in attendance, and they may quote and or reference anything that's presented or said in this session today. Also, with regards to anything reviewed or discussed by our esteemed panelists, all views and opinions are expressed are personal and are not necessarily representative of the views of the organizations that they represent. Nothing expressed during this summit should be considered investment advice. And lastly, and this is important, there will be a Q&A session that's going to happen at the very end of the event. And I'm sure there will be a lot of questions from this audience. Questions can be posted at any time, so please don't hesitate to just pop in a question, and our team will be reviewing them as they come in, and we'll be sharing the top questions after the live demonstration at the tail end of this broadcast. Okay, so let's meet our panelists. You guys can come on up. Okay, all right, so sitting to my left is Samir Gupta, the head of data solutions for Point72 and the New York Mets, where his teams are responsible for creating end-to-end solutions across the data lifecycle. Before joining Point72, Samir was the chief operating officer at iSentium, an artificial intelligence startup, where he led business functions including sales, business development, fundraising, and so Samir, I'd like to know, how does the work that you're doing with the Mets actually cross between what's going on now in the financial world?
I think there's a lot of parallels, and I will start with admitting, and this is what I admitted to New York Mets when I started with them earlier this year, that I was hardly a baseball fan. I was definitely not a Mets fan, and 9 months later, I'm very much into baseball, and I think Mets has a lifelong loyalty from me. So, and in terms of work, I think it's very similar. So, you know, as I found out when I first went into the Mets, the only thing I did was just a lot of discovery, talking to a lot of people in front office across scouting, player development, analytics, and systems were my big partners. And as I grew familiar with everything, you know, the funny thing was the problems that we see in finance are the problems that we see in baseball data. And so, you know, a good example is reference data. So we have a pretty, and this is the age-old problem for finance, and I think it's even more so dominant with alternative data, that you have to be able to tie names of brands to companies, to tickers, and to security identifiers. And then you can sort of take a lot of different data sets and you can analyze them at scale. Same thing sort of happens in baseball, where it's the same player who goes from the farm system, minor leagues, all the way to major league, but then they may have different player IDs when they were playing for school or for a summer league. So how do you tie that person across their career progression using reference data? Or for example, pitches. You can have pitches being captured by different data sets, and then therefore having that ability to tie them together is pretty huge.
The really kind of same data problems, but different questions, different targets. Yeah, interesting. All right, to his left, we have Antoine Amend, the technical director serving financial services at Databricks, where he's responsible for helping a broad range of banking and capital markets clients extract value from their data. Before joining Databricks, Antoine was the director of data science at Barclays, leading their AI practice, along with their data and analytics transformation. He also holds a master's degree in computational physics and is the author of Mastering Spark for Data Science. Welcome, Antoine.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Antoine, you have a really interesting vantage point into how the financial industry is modernizing their data capabilities. Can you tell us a little bit about the kinds of organizations that you work with, what they're trying to do with Databricks?
Yes, yeah, sure. So we work with, I would say, over 1,000 of organizations across financial services. So from different sectors, different industries, different segments, geographies. So you can imagine that we have, and we see a vast number of use cases. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to rapid data deployments, being able to move from really descriptive or looking at historical data and more towards predictive and even preventive or prescriptive analytics. So using more and more data, using more and more compute, using more AI and ML type of workflow, while still carrying on with the more SQL and dashboarding capabilities that are key to take those decisions. So we see a fantastic use cases across many different areas. It's all about that rapid deployment.
Fantastic. All right, and finally, my colleague Bill Digg, who is the head of NASDAQ Data Link and our recently launched data discovery platform. He has been leading alternative data at NASDAQ since early 2018. He spearheaded the acquisition of Quandl, also in 2018. Bill was recognized as one of Forbes 30 under 30 in finance in 2020, and he holds a BA in physics from the University of Chicago, as well as a management certificate in Wharton School of Finance. So thank you, Bill. Can you give us just a quick snapshot of what Data Link is and what the response has been so far?
Yeah, sure, of course. So as we've heard already, and probably going to talk a lot more about, there's sort of a problem in the industry of, getting value out of data. And that question is really interesting to me and the team. And I think it's something that we're really focused on solving is how do you improve data ROI? So when we look at what we're trying to do with Data Link and the reason we launched it, it's really about trying to raise the bar in terms of how you can find and access and integrate data. And NASDAQ's a technology company. We have a lot of amazing data assets. Data Link is a way for us to bring that up to cloud delivery. It's modern data infrastructure clients can find and integrate easily. So we're really excited about the capabilities there. And even further extending the mission with Fabric, which we'll talk about later.
All right. Well, thanks, Bill. Yeah. All right, so I'm excited for us to dive into the discussion. Just to set the stage for this panel, I'd like to give a little bit of context as to what we're going to be digging into, which are the results of research that we conducted in conjunction with research firm Wakefield. So we surveyed 200 US-based portfolio managers covering a full range of institutions, investment strategies, and sizes. And we got to ask them 30 questions covering the current state of their data infrastructure and assessment of their organizational strengths and weaknesses as it pertains to data management capabilities, as well as their future plans around investment and outsourcing. So before I get into the results and your reactions, what are your predictions so far? Are people going to be satisfied with their data management capabilities, dissatisfied, somewhere in between? Do we have any predictions?
I think they're dissatisfied.
I think that they would be probably more frustrated around like this lack of readiness or availability.
I think I'm optimistic. So even though they're dissatisfied, I think there should be optimism.
All right. All right. Well, we'll let's take a look at the first statistic there. There we go. All right, 54% of PMs are not satisfied with the organization's data infrastructure overall. All right, so kind of somewhere in between there. All right, 62% of PMs aren't satisfied with the speed at which their organizations can deploy data. Can we talk a little bit about the need for speed? Is it different today than the need for getting speed of actually working with data, bringing on new data sets? Has it always just been important to an organization, or is it different today? How does it differ between now and perhaps even just 5 years ago?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Yeah, I think generally, in business, it's always important to be agile and adaptive and move the ball forward and respond. So there's nothing new about wanting to be better at business and do that as fast as possible. I think what is new and what is different is the pace of change and the pace of innovation. Now, technology and capabilities are evolving faster than the span of one career or the lifetime of a typical sort of system or business processes. So I think there certainly has been an acceleration, and now what's capable, what's possible with current data capabilities is moving quickly. So I think there's a recognition of that, and definitely thinking about how do we accelerate, how do we take more advantage of what's possible is certainly in the forefront.
It almost feels like before you could maybe perhaps have a differentiator with how well you could deploy new data sets. Perhaps now it might be needed just to keep pace.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other comments on maybe the speed?
I would say in terms of speed, there are two aspects. There is really the horsepower of having the right environment that will answer that query right now, instead of just waiting for a few hours to complete. But that's just like querying one specific data set. The speed of onboarding new data, of driving new insights, of exploring and then translating those exploration into action is also what needs to be reduced in terms of delivery lifecycle. And that's part of the speed as well. So there is really the ability to query data fast and the ability to drive insights faster.
Yeah, not just early on in the pipeline of getting your data, but actually extracting the value and making good decisions. Okay. All right, we can go to the next slide. So we broke down the satisfaction with fundamental, 42% were satisfied, quantamental, 54% satisfied, and quantitative, less satisfied at 36% satisfaction. Why do we think that there's this kind of lower level of satisfaction at the quantitative level than perhaps the other two?
I can take this one. So I think it's pretty fascinating, this chart, and this is just my subjective view. Of course, Antoine and Bill will probably look at it from a different lens, but quants, it's very it is surprising that only 36% satisfaction exists in the quant land. How do I rationalize it? Maybe quants were so early, they built out very sophisticated technology about 15 to 20 years ago, before there was anything. And that technology worked really well for your traditional data sets, which came in very, very specific formats, mostly structured, mostly time series, and then they were able to add more speed to it as HFTs came along. So it all worked well. But then I think last 5 to 7 years or 8 years, as alternative data has taken hold, I think the technology that was built may not be enough, and this sort of explains, the stuff that Bill and Antoine are doing to solve those problems. So I think that might be a reason why they are so low down. While Quantamental, which is the new breed of investors that are first in line trying to make sense of alternative data, they have the right technology tools. They are making greenfield investments, and therefore they have no incumbency cost to consider of any existing infrastructure. So they can just jump onto the new solutions and build in order to solve the problems.
It's easier to adapt new emergent technology when you don't already have a mature infrastructure that you have to tie that into. That's
I
interesting.
would say probably it's mindset as well. Beyond just technology, is fundamentals have been more focusing around the use of AI, the use of ML, the use of alternative data. So even though they may not necessarily have the right technology, they already made that transition to how data could be useful for their decision making. And if we look at those two different extremes, then it comes back to the previous discussion we had around that horsepower of getting those models run faster on more and more data, or the more data that will drive those different type of investments. And I see potentially correlating with that dissatisfaction from fundamental and quantitative.
Yeah, totally. I would add as well. I think there's also probably a factor of the relative importance of data in the sort of critical business workflows across the different styles as well. If you're a quantitative fund and data is how you run your business, it's how you power your strategies. You may be trying to do a lot more than someone who's a quantamental or a fundamental firm. And it may be a lot more frustrating that you can't do more because it's directly correlated to outcomes in your business, right? And I think, if you have strategies waiting for you to deploy a data set, even if you could do it way faster than somebody who's, fundamental and might not have all the tools, it's still going to be a frustration, right? Because you're losing money every day. Right?
Yeah, something for a fundamental that might be a nice to have might be critical for a quantitative firm. Okay. All right, so looking at kind of our next set of stats, we've got, there's a lot to unpack here. Kind of the speed to onboard, integrate data sets, how fast they can actually assure the quality of those data sets and take those on, the time it takes for researchers and analysts to test out those new data sets and then deploy them to production and actually get data or value out of them. So just looking at these, across there, some of the trends that we're seeing, right? We've got a couple of things that stick out. If you look at the speed to QA data sets, fundamentals 18% is kind of a stark contrast to the other two with 51 and 33. How do we think about
Why would that be? Why is there such a huge disparity, do we think, between those?
I think that has to do with the number of cycles, right? I mean, as we talked about fundamental, I mean, you're probably dealing with fewer data sets. You probably don't have a well-oiled process for doing the QA. So every time it's bespoke, it's custom, you're starting, from scratch again, or you're doing the analysis, it's just on somebody's laptop as opposed to, part of an operationalized pipeline. You combine that with the last row, which I also think is very interesting, not getting support from data providers, not getting support from the upstream source, presumably the expert on what the data is and how it should be used. That really says to me that there's a product gap, right? That data is not being delivered and presented to fundamental firms in a way that they can easily use it. And that's, definitely a source of frustration, it seems.
I think the other thing that might explain this is fundamental. Most of that community still relies heavily on Excel as a tool, while Quantamental, I think, is mostly Python. And I think quants are still probably running a lot of C++ and C and whatnot. So I think given the variety of data sets that are emerging, I'd be curious to see when you say speed to QA data sets, are we talking about data sets which are modern day data sets like alternative data, in which case this makes sense because just the sheer size and scale and scope of alternative data is something that, you have a hard time wrangling with Excel, but Python, it's super easy. So I think just those skill sets within, and not to say that fundamentals are not trying to now move towards Quantamental. I think that shift is slowly happening, and you would over time see this number creep up.
Probably the data quality is also in line with the volume of data that they have to process daily. So when Samir mentioned, so looking at different records on an Excel spreadsheet, it's fairly obvious to see that this record is invalid. But when we are dealing with tens of millions of news analytics of alternative data, maybe they still need this. Obviously, we need that data quality and that data reliability, but it's probably less of an issue when looking at overall trends and macro factors than specific records.
So perhaps, do you think that perhaps the types of data that each of these types of clients are looking at differs from one to the other? So that would kind of directly correlate to, I think that's what you're...
I think overall, it's the same issue overall across fundamental, quantamental, quantitative, but it's a different materiality of that issue. Meaning that with Python, with advanced capability, with cloud-based technologies, it's easier to start addressing those large amounts of data. There still fundamentally is, I think, a data quality problem, but that has probably lower materiality when we look at overall trends, long-term factors than one specific record at a time.
Mm-hmm. How do we think the talent plays into some of these trends that we're seeing here? So we've got some statistics here. Percent of overall PMs indicating a lack of talent within the limits of the implementation of new data sets. So 32% for fundamental, 33% for quantamental, and 55% for quantitative. So how is this kind of death of talent? How's that kind of translating, you think, into to these different sectors?
Well, I think we talked a lot about these challenges, and I think we're talking about technology, but I think there's also a human element to this. And so, in order to get the value out of the data, you need somebody there who can understand the content, understand the business. Samir, as you said, talk to the front office, understand what their problems are, and translate that back into the data. What changes do I need to make? And that's a very particular skill set. It crosses a lot of different disciplines, and obviously hiring is tough now. And to an earlier point, I think quants have long been sort of hiring for that kind of skill set, and recognize it's probably more closely correlated to direct performance of their business. So I could definitely see a frustration there if they're bottlenecked by human hands.
I think there's a nuance that you bring out, Bill, and totally agree with what you said. I think I want to build on that a little bit, which is, quants have done this thing before quite well. And I think about that example, both quantitative traders as well as high frequency trading firms. And one of the things that, the point I'm making is on the surface, it looks like a talent problem, but I think it can be solved. But there's a more fundamental thing that needs to happen, which is communication, tight feedback loop. So what I mean by that is when you look at a quantitative trader, a portfolio manager, or a quant trading firm or a high frequency trading firm, those people would co-locate. So you will have a PM sitting here, you'll have a quant sitting here, and you'll have a technologist sitting next to them. And they would all know the problem that they were trying to solve, and everyone would be on the same page. And honestly, the scale of the problem was not big enough. So those 3 or 5 or 10 people could just be in the same room and talk and then be on the same page. Now throw in the alternative data that you just mentioned, Antoine. Millions and millions is like an understatement, billions of rows of data, and you just need different skill sets to just take the data in, which is data engineering. Then you need somebody to just like almost like a business analyst who's just making sure that when this is data quality, does this data make sense? Because it can come with a lot of quality issues. And then all the way into data scientists who's then saying, okay, this is all something I can believe in. Now, how do I make sure that I can derive some good insights? And oh, by the way, what insights am I deriving? So knowing what the problem is on the front end that the PMs and analysts are trying to solve. So yes, we've laid out the problem, we've laid out all the actors. Are we communicating as fast as we can to solve this problem? Even with AI will tell you some patterns, but it's a very rapid iteration, process of rapid iteration, and therefore I think that communication also becomes a thing which might be reflecting in these numbers.
So it's not just the lack of being able to bring on new talent, like we just don't have enough people. It's also that organizations, have to adapt their process and the way they work with one another as they grow and mature. So
That's exactly right.
yeah, startup has easy communication, but yeah.
I completely agree with Samir. Just coming back on this, it's not necessarily one superstar talent that will solve all the problems. It's a superstar team that needs to work together. We're talking about domain expertise, deep core mathematical knowledge, big data engineering, data management. We're looking at too many skills that could be done by only one person, and that communication and breaking those silos and working as a team to deliver that kind of agility.
All right, urgency to outsource. So 55% of PM surveyed currently outsource data infrastructure functions, 38% not outsourcing, plan to in the next 12 months. So, outsourcing, why is outsourcing considered kind of a dirty word? And which components of data management and pipelines, are really the easiest to outsource? Which ones are the hardest? How do you think about working with partners on data management problems?
I'd like to hear from Samir. From a practitioner perspective, you talk about the team working tightly together. Which parts of it can be abstracted away or can be sort of containerized enough to actually add efficiencies?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I think ingestion, data ingestion is something that I feel some strong industry partners should come in and do that job at scale. So fund managers don't have to worry about that. It also includes basic data quality checking. So that should be done. I think what should not be and is probably hard to outsource is how you analyze those data sets even during evaluation stage. And it's not just about analysis. It's very easy to analyze a data set standalone. Any data scientist can have a view on on a data set, but it's really about, okay, I've got this data set and I think there's value. Typically, it has to be accretive to what you are existing doing. You might be working with 5 other data sets in your current workflow. What's the incremental accretive effect of this data set? And you have to verify that in the evaluation stage. And why? Because with the proliferation of data we are seeing, there's 10 of every type of data sets out there. So which ones do you go after? And I'm not a fan of going after the most glossy marketing material. So, you have to sort of do that. You have to do it on your own. And the other reason is firms have their own playbooks. So it's not something that a partner can say, okay, this is how you integrate, because A, firms have their own playbook. 2, most of them are pretty secretive for the right reasons about how they use those data sets. So I think those activities you probably want to have as a core capability in the fund management
Kind of
business.
almost on both ends of the spectrum, on the sourcing, what is going to be valuable to me, and then kind of perhaps what you do with that data.
That's right.
Because we don't know what we don't know yet. We need to try to bring a new data to evaluate this usability of that data, the value in that data, without spending 6 months of sourcing and curating and onboarding and going through procurement and all the kind of admin process that come with that. So it's more about spending more time, and this is something that I see every day, spending more time driving value from the data and exploring, and less time on stitching those products together that will make that evaluation possible. So everything that is from a DevOps, a data ops, ML ops, all those stitching those activities together is most likely to be outsourced first.
Yeah.
Most of these results, I mean, they kind of make sense, right? To me, a lot of this is intuitive. What I think is very interesting is the desire or the comfort of fundamental firms outsourcing the analytics, to your point, Samir. And so, does that speak to that same sort of product gap, or data is just not being presented in a way that's useful for a fundamental business? I mean, that's a pretty stark difference between those two. That's a point.
So, I mean, really, I guess out of these components, though, are there things that are just have been commoditized and really don't provide a lot of value? They're not differentiators for these firms. I think some of this, you can understand why perhaps the sourcing components, like you mentioned, Samir, you would want to make sure you're choosing what data comes in. But are there elements of the stack where really these things have been commoditized, and you can now focus on your differentiators by outsourcing or by partnering?
I mean, I think there's things have been commoditized to a degree that's not enough across each of these dimensions. So the bar is really high. And what does that mean? There's a lot of opportunity for a formidable provider across any of these tribes to come in and do a really good job to get that market share. And even if you have a good solution out there, I think, Bill, you mentioned the pace of change is so fast that you just can't be complacent. If you were one of the best sources or providers a year ago, chances are, if you're not innovating, somebody will leapfrog you. So I think there's just like, the rapid pace of innovation makes this a very nice opportunity space for people to continue to innovate.
One last thing I wanted to point out, Bill, you mentioned the disparity on the analytics stats there. The QA stats, though, as well, you can see the quantamental, huge variance between that and the quantitative as far as the readiness to outsource. Why do we think that those two have such a differentiation?
For me, I think, for quants, like we talked about before, probably already have a QA machine, right? A QA setup. A lot of it's already automated and done the way that they like it, right? And they're very particular because they're so sensitive to particulars of the data. I think for Quantamental, there's probably a little bit less sensitivity to absolute precision in the data on the one end. And there may not be as many sort of, pre-built or pre-existing, sources for that. And you know what, like QA is not particularly differentiating, right? Making sure you get the, you know, the timestamps right. And, you know, that kind of thing, right? Making sure the data shows up on time. So I think, you know, seeing a high willingness to outsource, you know, definitely makes sense to me for Quantamental. Low for fundamentals, but I think we already talked about, you know, the volume of data that they're consuming and using is probably also relatively low.
Okay. All right. So looking to the future, what do we see as far as trends when it comes to data management? What are we seeing firms are some best practices that firms are starting to deploy when it comes to the data lifecycle and data management lifecycle? Any thoughts on what's next? What are some of the trends that we're picking up on?
So from what I see is AI is obviously not new, but AI for a long time almost has been cast on the side as an exploration lab. And now we're seeing more and more AI being used in the core data pipelines, data management. And when we think of having a simple dashboard that just contextualizes data, but also brings those AI-driven insights into one dashboard, is what really creates a holistic view for asset managers to take the right decision with access to all that information. So it's moving away from AI as the shiny toy on the side to AI pouring those signal that could be used for strategic
Practical implementation of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's kind of almost AI going mainstream and then becoming part of firms' data management.
Yeah. So just an example, if we think of all the alternative data, just being able to correlate those information is not an easy undertaking. And just bringing all that data into one dashboard will be absolutely meaningless until we've started to contextualize that information. So this is the challenges and the trends that we see.
And I think building on Antoine's point, which is, you know, if AI is going to become mainstream, cloud computing has to become mainstream. So I think a lot of firms are already in cloud, but there are a lot of firms which are still doing stuff on-prem. You know, we have Point72 have been, you know, we've spoken about our multi-cloud strategy. So I think that though, you know, being in the cloud enables you to seamlessly use the AI and ML tools that are becoming available across data sets. You know, that just makes it easy. So I think cloud computing to me is like a very sort of like a first step and your quest towards like what Antoine just said.
I feel like putting your critical data, very sensitive data out in the cloud for a while, you know, people were hesitant to do that. And now we're seeing organizations put the most critical workloads, most sensitive data working in the cloud. And yeah, that does seem to be a clear trend.
Yeah, I'd like to add, I mean, to both of your points, you know, taking that to a logical conclusion as well, as more AI gets introduced into the, you know, the front office applications, and as cloud becomes, you know, more pervasive, there's more data. And you can't have great AI without lots of great data, right? So I think that need is going to continue to grow. I think one of the real powers of the cloud is that you get this abstraction layer, right? You can start to talk about infrastructure as code, right? And where I can now write software patterns that, you know, translate to, you know, things that used to be physical manual processes. That's really, really powerful. I think, you know, one of the things I'm you know, really interested in exploring and diving into a little more is thinking about data as product, right? Giving yourself another layer of abstraction where you can start to work on data sets, not, you know, the bits and bytes of like what's in there, but actually what can it do? How can I deploy it? How can I arrange these things and bring them together to drive more business insights? So, you know, I'm really excited to see that. I think we're starting to see more of that in the industry. Starting to see a lot more of our clients have these, you know, data enablement functions and thinking about when they bring in a new product, building, you know, a new data set, they're building a product that they then turn around and present to, you know, the PM teams as their customer. And I think that's the right mindset for how we get more data, how we get to better AI-driven insights.
Yeah, I wonder if like data tagging, metadata is now more important than ever when you're trying to bring these things together. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for everybody for joining us for this panel. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate all of your insights and sharing the stories with us today. So coming up next, Bill Daig is going to share with us a new product that we just launched, the NASDAQ Data Fabric that we've been working with Databricks. So we will show some of that functionality. I think, Bill, you're going to kind of walk through what it is, what it does, and then actually give a live demo, which is always dangerous. So fingers crossed, live demo in just a bit.
Okay.
So thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That was awesome. Are we good here? That was awesome. Love that. I'm super excited about it. So we just heard a lot about the challenges in getting value out of data and some of the pain points in the industry and some of the areas of focus to move things forward. And as I said before, I think this problem set is really, really interesting. It's something I'm personally very passionate about because I see it as such an important step forward. Technology has gotten good enough, right? We should be able to solve for a lot of this, but business systems and processes and products in the market, haven't adapted yet to the speed of innovation. So, there's a gap there, and I think, someone should come in and fill it. And that's part of the reason we launched NASDAQ Data Link. Try to set a new standard for data delivery and consumption experience for clients. And we're really committed to helping our clients get more ROI out of the data, out of their data. We have great APIs, Excel plugins, SDKs, make it super easy to seamlessly integrate, data you buy through NASDAQ Data Link or get through NASDAQ Data Link, which is great. And we get a lot of really positive feedback from clients throughout the years for that. But unfortunately, not everybody buys all of their data from NASDAQ Data Link. The reality is you get data from hundreds of different sources and, generated internally and, it's fragmented and hard to, get your arms around. So there's only so much we can do as NASDAQ Data Link, as a data marketplace to, drive value, further down the stack for clients. I used to hear that all the time from customers. I wish I had this same experience, this Data Link or previously Quandl experience for all of my data. It's too bad it's just for data products that you sell. So that's why I'm super excited about our new Fabric product. NASDAQ Data Fabric it's a really powerful new feature inside of NASDAQ Data Link that allows you to bring your own data to the platform, have it securely managed for you without having to build out any new infrastructure, without having to really think about the process. If you think about where we're coming from, NASDAQ Data Link and previously Quandl, this is a natural direction for us to go in. Started as a data marketplace, and we had to solve for a lot of these challenges for us to be able to scale up, to have thousands of data sets coming from all these different sources, making sure that it runs every day, is QA'd and shows up in the API in a way that's easy to use and is reliable for production use cases. So we had to build a process that scaled. We had to build the technology and develop the people and the skill set and the processes internally. So for us to extend that to our clients seems really natural. And with the added firepower of NASDAQ, being able to securely operate mission critical systems, around the world, as Lauren mentioned, 150 markets plus, it seems like just a great opportunity for us to add value. So we can bring that scale to our clients. And I think it's going to be really important for us to take the next step forward. So I want to sort of zoom out for a second and sort of restate the problem. And I'm going to do that by sort of walking through the typical sort of data deployment cycle. So you're trying to ingest a new data set into your firm, get it onboarded and deployed and get value out of it. First thing you have to do is find the data. You have to connect to the source. You have to parse the data, probably reformat it, get it into something that's usable, columnar, structured, sometimes write custom parsing logic here. Then you need to clean and QA it, make sure that there aren't any weird inconsistencies, understand the logic, start building that out. Normalize it if you have a symbology that you want to apply, applying that, documenting, cataloging, tagging it, and then loading it into warehouse where you can actually use it. And then starts the whole productization workflow. You need to have your compute environments. You need to dive in and understand what kind of pre-processing logic do I need on this data set? How do I want to ETL this? What do I want the finished product to look like? You have to build the ETL pipeline and then make sure it runs on a consistent basis. So you need monitoring, you need ongoing QA. You need to maintain all of these sort of data product pipelines that you're building. And then finally, after all of that, you start to get actually, to a place where you can get value out. So I call this a Candyland slide here. And, you can get stuck in any of these, steps and have to go back to the beginning or start over and iterate. So you can spend a lot of time in this cycle. And it involves a lot of different disciplines. It involves dev, DevOps, QA, data engineering, data science, business analysts, et cetera. So either you have a lot of handoffs throughout this process, and which can be inefficient and add friction, or you have people wearing multiple hats and doing multiple jobs. I've heard lots of stories from clients of traders and PMs on the front lines on the trade desk having to scrub data on the weekends so that they can do their job better, right? Is that where you want those people spending their time? That's very that skill set. So that's what we're solving for with Data Fabric. You just get to skip right to the end. It's like cheating in Candyland. So we take care of everything for you. You just pick the data source and you figure out how you want to use it and deploy it in the wild. We have a data concierge team who can actually get a data set production ready in a matter of weeks as opposed to months, right? Which is more typical. And I think that's the power of that abstraction layer I was talking about, thinking about data as product, right? And thinking about how do I take these products and do something useful and extract value. So we take care of the ingest, onboarding, productization, deployment, regardless of where the data comes from. And we give you a single source for you to control and access all of your data. So here's how it looks. Here's how it works. For ingestion, we'll connect to the data source directly, whether it's if it's a third party or an external firm, or we'll pick it up from you if it's an internal data set. We copy it, archive it. We parse it so that it's structured and can be databased. Set up ongoing jobs. Make sure that we understand the SLAs, when the data is going to be delivered, and how reliable is it. All you have to do is point us to the data set and make sure we can access it. Then for onboarding, we get in, we actually understand the structure of the data. We understand the content, we evaluate the data quality and delivery consistency. We clean the data of errors. If you have a symbology, we'll apply it. And we load it in, make it accessible via our API, Excel plugin, what have you. And then that whole pipeline of making sure that it runs every day and is reliable and is production ready is on us. So we take care of making sure that it runs every day, making sure that the data shows up where it needs to. And we do that while enforcing governance, access controls, and giving you more control, more flexibility on how your data is used and by who. Finally, when it comes to how do you deploy this on the front lines and get value, that's where you get to focus, right? That's where you get to spend your time, not on this sort of disproportionately, commoditized work, a non-differentiated heavy lift of all the steps before. You can focus more on getting value. How do you leverage the platform? So that's Data Fabric at a high level, what we're trying to achieve. I want to show you how it works. And so what I'm going to show you is I'm going to embody an analyst at a fictitious fund, Omnia Wealth. And I am going to sort of go through a workflow of how I can take data from Nasdaq Data Link or Data Fabric, perform an analysis, do something that's useful, and then sort of get that back in the platform and you know, start to iterate and actually have cumulative value. So I'm going to flip to. Okay. So here we are at Nasdaq Data Link. Hopefully this is all super familiar to everybody. But if it's not, data.nasdaq.com, we have data catalog, hundreds of data products in there. You can come in, you can browse. We have great, easy to use documentation. You know, our plugins, very, very easy to figure out what's in the data and how to use it. Now I'm going to log in as my Omnia Wealth analyst. And you can see I have my core data, alternative data, ESG Hub data, just like before, but I also get this special catalog here, which is private to Omnia Wealth users. So this is what Data Fabric really looks like on the front end. It's a private catalog. It's the same data link experience, but applied to your data, regardless of where it comes from. It can be other vendors, third parties. We ingest it and manage it on your behalf like an infrastructure provider. We actually have a client using this for internal data as well. So, you know, there's a lot of benefit to getting everything in one place. So I'm an analyst. I'm super curious to learn a little bit more about what's happening in the rise of retail trading activities. So I'm going to look for some data sets that I think are relevant. Nothing in my Omnia catalog, but I see something here for retail equity flows. This looks like an interesting data set. Let's assume for our purposes here, we've actually subscribed to this data set. I'm going to need a couple others. I'm going to need some price data, obviously, if I'm going to do a market analysis. So I'll go ahead and get that. This quote media data set looks right. And I'm going to need core fundamentals, maybe to have some sector information so I can see, you know, broader trends. So this looks good too. Great. So I've got my 3 data sets. I want to do my analysis. I'm going to switch over to my compute environment. And this could be any compute environment. This could be, you know, your own local Python Jupyter notebook. This could be whatever. I happen to like Databricks, so that's what I'm using. But now I'm going to go through and actually do my analysis. My business objective is I want to understand retail investment trends. You know, is interest changing over time? What segments of the market have more retail interest? And, you know, what's the overall interest been in meme stocks since the start of the pandemic? So I'm going to import my packages. Of course, that's a good place to start. Have the Nasdaq Data Link package and the Delta sharing package, which I'll talk about in a second. And all I have to do is bring my API key here and plug it in, and I'm ready to go. I'm going to pick a few tickers that are, you know, sort of relevant for retail and part of the maybe meme stock universe. Then I want to get started pulling in the data. So data delivered through Data Link. I have a nice, you know, 1-line command to pull the data in and have it structured. So let's take a look at that. There it is. Nice pandas data frame. I'm going to get my sector data from Shardar. Here it is. That looks good. Here's my sector and industry. I'm going to use that. Let me just take a quick look and make sure that the time series data is okay. There we go. Seems fine. Yep, seems, well, I don't know if that's normal, but it seems right. Now I'm going to join the data together, which is easy to do. Great. So now I've got my prices and I've got my sector, industry, and market cap information. So I've joined those 2 data sets. Now I want to get the retail data, the retail flow data from Nasdaq Data Link. Problem with the retail data is that it's intraday. And as many intraday data sets can be, it's very large, you know, on the order of hundreds of gigabytes or terabytes of information. Much too much to pull through, you know, a REST API into memory on my computing environment. So I need a better solution, and that's where delta sharing comes in. So I'll just give you a quick sort of high-level overview. I'm sure Databricks folks will do it much better than me, but delta sharing is essentially a way to access data where it lives in a controlled and governed way. It's an open source protocol from Databricks released earlier this year. And you can use the networking backbone of the cloud providers to efficiently and parallelizably transfer data. So I think that's super interesting because it helps solve some of this problem of moving huge, gigantic data sets around. You talk about tick history data sets and that kind of thing. That's something we deal with all the time. So we're really excited to be integrating the delta sharing protocol into our own delivery of data sets through Nasdaq Data Link and Data Fabric. So you can use this protocol as part of your experience. And we'll be joining a whole host of other tools. This is I think a capability the industry really needs, and it has some quick adoption. So what's the experience like? I'm the analyst at Omnia Wealth. I want to receive data via delta sharing. When I'm entitled to the data, I'll get a credential file, a share file that has a location. It tells me that, says where the data is, and an auth token. So this is a sensitive file. You want to save it somewhere secure, but you can access it. And then you connect to a sharing server. So in our case, Nasdaq Data Link is hosting a delta sharing server. I can use, my tools, as I said, with lots of different plugins to connect to that server. I provide my share file. The server authenticates, says you have access to this data set, in this way. Here are some pre-signed, short-lived, temporary URLs you can use to access them directly in S3. Again, that's really powerful because my computing environment is in S3, right? So it's much more efficient to bring the compute closer to the data. So back to the demo, we're actually going to do this. Here's my share file, and here's the path to the data I want. And I'm going to load it into a Spark cluster. The data is too big to go into my Pandas notebook, so I'm going to load it in as a Spark data frame. This might take a sec. There we go. Great. There's my data. Looks awesome. Now I want to do something useful with it. So I want to join it to the other data sets that I have. So I'm going to do some aggregation. I only need it at the day level. So I'm going to aggregate up to day, and I have a smaller symbol universe as well than the whole US market. So that should bring the data size down quite a bit. So I'm going to apply my filter, and then I'm going to pull the data back into Pandas, into memory, so I can work with it on my local cluster more effectively. This one takes a second, but it's actually pretty fast if you consider how much data we just interacted with, 9 seconds. So now I have my data frames. I can join them together. I get my final results data set. It has everything, my ticker, price information, sector information, and the retail flow information from the UREF product. So now I can do my analysis. Now I can start my analysis. I'm going to do a few sort of derived columns, just different kinds of net volume, gross volume, cumulative volume. And then I want to just start digging in, taking a look. So I've got a plot here that shows my cumulative volume over time, shows my closing price in red, and the sort of daily volume. And I can dig in and look for trends and patterns. Also got this sort of fancy widget here that I can just quickly update and sort of get through and look at different stocks. Have a nice experience, nice workflow. Want to see if there's a broader trend at play. So let's look at it by sector. Here we go. Obviously, consumer brands tend to be more popular, it looks like, and probably surprised to no one who's been paying attention lately. AMC is very popular. So here, size is total volume, so you think of that as interest, and color is sort of sentiment, directionality. So very strong positive sentiment from retail on AMC over the past since 2020. Next, I want to look overall for my basket of meme stocks. Are retail users losing interest in general? The answer is no. They have been accumulating net positive position over time in the meme stocks. So That's all great. This is a very valuable insight for me. I want to be able to publish this. I want to be able to build this into downstream reports, downstream dashboards for my, my trading colleagues. So I can save the final data set. And obviously I save the data set that I just created here, but it's stale, right? I need it to be updated every day. I need to have a process for getting that updated. So Databricks has this nice fancy scheduling capability. So I can, schedule this notebook to run at a certain time every day, which is great. But you could use any tool basically to generate the data, pull the API, do the calculations, and produce the updated result set. And then I can onboard that into Data Fabric. So I contact the data concierge team at NASDAQ. I tell them where the data is, what's the delivery schedule, and they ingest the data. They pick it up, they document it, they make sure it's loaded and arrives on time, has the QA checks. So from there, once that's done, I can plug in my downstream applications, my dashboards, my reports, et cetera. Here's an example of us using, Power BI on top of this data, for example, which is kind of cool because Power BI can leverage Delta sharing sort of natively. So as we expose data sets with the Delta sharing protocol, they can easily plug into to Power BI. So that's really great. I think that's really interesting. Hopefully you do too. There's this really interesting element of having to work with a human in the loop, a human team, the NASDAQ data concierge team. And that's a really important part of making sure the data is production ready, is reliable. You need someone who understands, can make judgment calls, and make sure that the data is reliable. But sometimes you want to collaborate more efficiently. You want to be quicker. You want to have a shorter cycle time so that you can work with your colleagues a little more quickly. So I want a sneak peek of some upcoming functionality we have planned for 2022. And the idea here is to provide full self-serve for users of Data Fabric. So you can bring your data sets to the platform, make them available and controlled through the platform. All by yourself. So I have this platform, we call it Codename Autonode. I'm going to log in. I'm an Omnia Wealth analyst. Again, I have this interesting data set. You can see here, these are the providers that were in my Fabric catalog before. I'm going to go to Omnia Wealth because it's an internal data set, and I can add a new product right through this dashboard. Say, retail. Okay. Okay. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I have some here. There we go. Data is daily. Updated daily. History since 2020. 2021 coverage, medium stocks, reporting lag, say it's 8 o'clock T +1. Contact sales. If you have questions about the data set, you can contact me. Okay. And I'm going to cheat again. And there we go. So I've just built my documentation page. In the future, I'll be able to add all the information about connecting to the data set, building that sort of those QA pipes, having some pre-canned logic you can apply to that, and then publishing the full end-to-end data workflow. But here for the product page, I can save the details, and then I can go ahead and publish the page. Yes, I want to publish the page. There it is. Now, if I go back to my Omnia Wealth catalog, there it is. It shows up for everyone in my organization who's entitled to view it. They can now see my work, my research, come in and access the product. So, this is pretty powerful. I mean, there's a whole host of tools we have for managing entitlements around this data set. as well. There's a workflow for that, adding users, inviting colleagues, that kind of thing. So I hope that gives you a sense for how quickly the cycle time can actually be. For you to test an idea, get access to the data right away, create a derived product, and then bring that back. So you get that accumulating advantage of insights in your firm. So with Data Fabric, you can actually get that same slick, easy to use interface for all of your data to really speed up your workflows. You don't have to worry about maintaining the data or any servers or processes or pipelines. It's all controlled, it's secure, and it's easy to share with your organization. So this is that abstraction again, trying to think about consuming the data as if it's a finished product, right? And building your business off of those Lego blocks, as opposed to going all the way down to the bare metal every time, right? So I hope you're excited. I'm really excited to engage with you all. As you have thoughts about how we can move this forward. Really appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. So at this point, we're going to switch to the Q&A portion. Many of you have already sent in your questions, so I've got them here. And if you add new ones, they'll send them to me. I'll get them on my phone here. So feel free to keep adding. The one that we got the most was just, how do I get a copy of the report? So if you didn't see that, as soon as the report is available, that will go out. We'll send you guys a link so you can get access to the report. Couple other questions. Bill, one of the questions was around big data and just like what type of formats does it have to be in order for to be able to use it with the data fabric? How well does the platform support big data?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's like I said, that's a big part of why we're excited about the Delta sharing capability and the partnership with Databricks, is to really bring that super scale. The platform is great for iterating quickly on data sets, and that's not typically part of the big data workflow. So we generally work very well with any data that's structured. We love CSV, we love columnar formats. Delta files is a great format as well. Parquet. We can operate on top of all of those. Delta sharing can operate on top of those columnar formats as well. So it does scale nicely.
Okay. Next question for Antoine. How does Delta sharing stack up against some of the other solutions in the market?
Yes, sure. So I think Delta sharing is drastically different in a way of the format and the protocol being used. So at the core of everything that we do at Databricks is all open source. It's open source Spark that were subsequently open source, but developed by Databricks. Delta Lake, which is the format that we use for storing all that information, for enabling those ACID transactions, bringing the best of data warehousing and data lakehouse capability within one platform. So using that open format where the data is schematized, validated, curated, available, is those files being then exchanged with a data consumer. So from a data consumer side of things, all that to say that it doesn't even matter if you're on a Databricks or not, if you're on this platform or not. You could be using your Power BI on those same files, the same way you'll be using your other BI tools of choice on those same files or Databricks environments. So reading data that has been curated, schematized, just like you will be reading a table without having to be on the same environment. So that's open protocol, secure on open format.
I think there are some other options in the market that are sort of geared at the same problem, but they're, to your point, I think they're much more closed ecosystem. They're part of enterprise software. It's, you need someone else to have the same technology to be able to share it with you. I think that's what, excites us about, using this, is we can integrate it with our own platform and, really get the value out of it.
Okay, kind of related. So we had a question come in. Is Data Fabric, can it only be used for research, kind of historic type data, or can it also handle real-time data sets?
Yeah, we do have streaming capability. We're building off of, our competence in delivering data through the cloud via Kafka and other technologies. So we can achieve pretty good throughput. We do that for market data today. So it does handle real-time data fairly well. The whole point is that you have a way to power your production pipelines, right? So it needs to update it. It needs to handle that.
So it can be used for real-time production data systems.
Definitely not low latency, but we can do pretty well streaming in the cloud.
Yeah, like millisecond, second latency, not microsecond.
No, yeah, not nanos.
Okay, we had some other questions. Let's see. Bill, a lot of these are for you here. Bill, can output from one pipeline be input for another pipeline and essentially kick off downstream pipelines?
Yeah, exactly. So, that's something we can chain together. Like I said, when we have full self-serve, that's something you'll be able to chain together as a user, provided you have the appropriate permissions, of course. That's sort of the point. I think once you achieve that, that's where you start to get scale, right? You start to continually, get recursive benefits on your data, your investments there. So yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Do you offer data versioning to enable point-in-time analysis and to check data quality?
It's possible. I wouldn't say we're perfect in every way, but it's doable for sure. It's built in the platform. We have sort of point-in-time API capability as well.
Okay. Samir, this one came for you. What are some ways that firms, think about setting up their data management teams in general? Any heuristics that you've developed there?
I think it really depends on, who you are. So, the answer would be different if you are a big asset manager, big investment bank, big hedge fund versus, hedge funds, they're very successful hedge funds that are just very, very small in size. So, I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of a bigger organization. And one way to think about this is, you start with a sourcing team, which is all it does is actively scouting for new data sets. And again, the size of sourcing team can grow from being a one-person team to multiple people, and each person is an expert in the sector they cover. So you can go really creative even with sourcing. From sourcing, this is the team that brings data sets in, and then your data engineering team takes over. So these are folks, I think, users of Databricks at scale. So a big sophisticated data engineering team would be responsible for managing your cloud footprint, for managing other very sophisticated tools that you might be using. But that team takes the data in, stores it such that it's available for users to use. As it stores it, it also does a little bit of data cleansing to make sure that data is not, for example, if 2 months are missing for a data set, that's a pretty big no-no. So it typically falls onto the data engineering team to spot those issues. Mm-hmm. Once it goes past data engineering, then data science takes over. And data science then basically goes in and says, let me see if this data has the insights that could be accretive. And then on the far end is basically, and that's how a lot of teams operate. And I mentioned this in my prior comment that you have to be able to understand what you're trying to solve for. So on the front end is your research analysts, your portfolio managers who are really guiding what are the insights that you are going after in a particular type of data. So that sort of is really, and then of course, I think the scale at which we operate, we have a very sophisticated data compliance function. All the data ops, data compliance, legal, as well as just support and stuff. So all those are pretty critical teams as well as you do this thing at scale.
Okay. Well, I have you. They had one more actually for you, Samir, which was, can you elaborate on the multi-cloud strategy that you talked about earlier?
I think, I won't go deep into it. We definitely are embarking on that journey. I think with cloud, it's very important to not see one solution as a one size fits all, because it rarely is. And then add to the fact that we have a pretty significant on-prem footprint that we are obviously taking into the cloud. So when you talk about multi-cloud, it's not just about the big cloud providers and how you're distributing your loads across those, but also I think somebody mentioned sensitive data. I think you mentioned that, Mike, which is if data is truly really sensitive, you want to keep that on-prem, but at least at the same time be able to analyze it when you have to in ways that it's secure. So I think that is really the way you think about a multi-cloud strategy. And again, it's about taking a use case and looking at a solution, not worrying about this is my primary cloud deployment.
Okay. Bill, we had a question come in for you. Can you talk about the QA process, identifying holes in data or otherwise highlighting biases in data?
Yeah, like I said, I think that's a really important part of our offering is that data concierge, that sort of the human touch. And so, we have lots of tools built out already to help with QA, lots of automatic analysis and things we can do to look for issues. And then we also, like I said, we have those people who understand the business, who can look at something and be like, that's kind of funny, that shouldn't be a gap there. Or, why does this price suddenly change, by 10x, halfway through the time series, and can dig in, go back and work with the vendor and figure it out, and then codify all of that in code that runs automatically on the data pipelines as it comes in. So it's an iterative process. We have a lot that's automatic. That's a lot of that's built out in tools, but then there's also this human overlay that we have as well. We're not going to do things like, complex processing, injecting a lot of logic. I think that customers like to do that themselves, or at least have a lot more control over that. But we will do, stuff that's obviously wrong. We take care of it.
Okay. And another question, Bill, are you using Redshift, Snowflake on AWS to power the columnar backend? I think I could answer this, but.
We use a variety of technologies. We use the right tool for the job, and there are different parts of the system that do different things. So we definitely have a variety of tools. We're based in AWS. Obviously, it probably wouldn't be a surprise for me to say we have Databricks under the hood somewhere as well. So there's, I think that's all I can say.
Yeah. All right. Let's see if there's any other questions here. Just going through. Market. Maybe one last one here. How do data lakes fit into the picture of the data fabric?
I think that's something where, I don't think there's a one size fits all solution. I think a lot of firms come with their own infrastructure, their own processes, right? Nobody has zero data infrastructure today. So there is. I think there's a path when we work with a new client, understanding the needs, understanding what they have today, what capabilities, and where we can use Fabric to augment them. In some cases we sit alongside, a data lake. In other cases, we can actually subsume that and actually add, capabilities sort of around the data lake as well.
Okay. All right. Well, that's all the questions that I've received so far. So thank you for all the panelists. I appreciate the dialogue.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.